A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The description of King Uttanapada's palace depicts the state of affairs many hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled. Since it is described that Maharaj Dhruva ruled for 36,000 years, he must have lived in the Satya Yuga, when people lived for 100,000 years. The life durations in the four yugas are also mentioned in the Vedic literature. In the Satya Yuga, people used to live for 100,000 years. In the Treta Yuga, people lived for 10,000 years. In Dwapara Yuga, they lived for 1,000 years. And in this age, Kali Yuga, people may live up to 100 years. It says, therefore, with the progressive advance of each new yuga, the duration of human life is reduced by 90%, from 100,000 to 10,000, from 10,000 to 1,000, and from 1,000 to 100. It is said that Dhruva Maharaj was the great-grandson of Lord Brahma. This indicates that Dhruva Maharaj's time was in the Satya Yuga, in the beginning of creation. During one day of Lord Brahma, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, there are many Satya Yugas. Wow. According to the Vedic calculation, at the present moment, the 28th millennium is current. It can be calculated that Dhruva Maharaj lived many millions of years ago. But the description of the palace of Dhruva's father is so glorious that we cannot accept that advanced human civilization did not exist even 40 or 50,000 years ago. There were walls like those in the palace of Maharaj Uttanapada. Even very recently, during the Mughal period, anyone who has seen the Red Fort in Delhi must have marked that the walls are made of marble and were once decorated with jewels. During the British period, all those jewels were taken away and dispatched to the British Museum. Thank you very much, Ritz. And this is completely thieves. The conception of worldly opulence was formerly based mainly on natural resources such as jewels, marble, silk, ivory, gold, and silver. The advancement of economic development was not based on big motor cars. Advancement of human civilization depends on industrial enterprises, but not on industrial enterprises. Let me read that again. The advancement of economic development was not based on big motor cars. Advancement of human civilization depends not on industrial enterprises, but on possession of natural wealth and natural food, which is all supplied by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that we may save time for self-realization and success in the human form of body. Okay, that's very interesting. Another aspect of this verse is that Dhruva Maharaj's father, Uttanapada, would very soon give up attachment for his palaces and would go to the forest for self-realization. From the description of Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, we can make a very thorough comparative study of modern civilization and the civilization of mankind in the other millenniums, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Dwapara Yuga. Text 63. The king's residence was surrounded by gardens wherein there were varieties of trees brought from the heavenly planets. In those trees, there were pairs of sweetly singing birds and almost mad bumblebees, which made a very relishable buzzing sound. Most people are afraid of bumblebees. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the word Amara Drumai, with trees brought from the heavenly planets, is very significant. The heavenly planets are known as Amara Loka, the planets where death is very much delayed, because the people there live for 10,000 years, according to the calculations of the demigods, in which our 6 months are equal to 1 day. The demigods live in the heavenly planets for months, years, and 10,000s of years, according to heavenly planet. 10,000s of years according to demigod time. And then again, after the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they fall down to this earth. These are the statements that can be collected from Vedic literature. As the people there live for 10,000 years, so also do the trees. Of course, here on the earth, there are many trees which live for 10,000 years. So what to speak of the trees on the heavenly planets? They must live for more than many 10,000s of years. And sometimes, as practiced even now, some valuable trees are taken from one place to another. It is elsewhere stated that when Lord Krishna went to the heavenly planets with his wife Satyabhama, he took a parijata flower tree from heaven and brought it to the earth. There was a fight between Krishna and the demigods due to the parijata trees being taken from heaven to this planet. The parijata was planted in the palace of Lord Krishna, which was occupied by Queen Satyabhama. The flower and fruit trees in the heavenly planets are superior, for they are very pleasant and tasteful, and it appears that in the palace of Maharaj Uttanapada, there were many varieties of such trees. Wow. Text 64. There were emerald staircases which led to lakes full of variously colored lotus flowers and lilies and swans, karandavas, chakravakas, cranes, and similar other valuable birds were visible in those lakes. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears that not only was the palace surrounded by compounds and gardens with varieties of trees, but there were small man-made lakes also, where the water was full of many colored lotus flowers and lilies. And to get down to the lakes, there were staircases made of valuable jewels, such as emeralds. By the beautifully positioned garden houses, there were many luxurious birds, such as swans, chakravakas, karandavas, and cranes. These birds generally do not live in filthy places like crows do.
Mhm.
The atmosphere of the city was very healthy and beautiful. It can simply be imagined from its description. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how there are so many crows in India, especially where there is a lot of uh, unclean places. And even here, there are a lot of crows, and they're black, and they make these bad noises. Uh, so they're not very auspicious at all. And that's why it says these birds generally do not live in filthy places like crows do. So the atmosphere of the city was very healthy and beautiful. It can simply be imagined from the descriptions. Text 65. The saintly king Uttanapada, hearing of the glorious deeds of Dhruva Maharaja, and personally seeing also how influential and great he was, felt very satisfied. For Dhruva's activities were wonderful to the supreme degree. Haribol. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When Dhruva Maharaj was in the forest executing his austerities, his father Uttanapada heard everything about his very wonderful activities. Although Dhruva Maharaja was the son of a king and was only 5 years old, he went to the forest and executed devotional service under strict austerity. Therefore, his acts were all wonderful. And when he came back home, naturally, because of his spiritual qualifications, he became very popular amongst the citizens. He must have performed many wonderful activities by the grace of the Lord. No one is more satisfied than the father of a person who is credited with glorious activities. Maharaj Uttanapada was not an ordinary king. He was a Rajarsi, a saintly king. Formerly, this earth was ruled by one saintly king only. Kings were trained to become saintly. Therefore, they had no other concern than the welfare of the citizens. These saintly kings were properly trained and is, as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita also, the science of God or the yoga system of devotional service known as Bhagavad Gita was spoken to the saintly kings of the sun planet, and gradually it descended through the Kshatriya kings who were generated from the sun and the moon. If the head of the government is saintly, certainly the citizens become saintly. And they are very happy because both their spiritual and physical needs and hankerings are satisfied. Very good. Unfortunately, we don't have too many saintly kings anymore. In fact, we hardly have any kings. and,
Mm.
uh, and the ones that we do have are not really saintly. Why? Because they drink alcohol, they eat meat, and so forth. Although they might be very rich and they might be living in palaces, but they're the culture that they have is no longer really saintly. Text 66. When, after concentration, King Uttarapada saw that Dhruva Maharaja was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, and that his ministers were agreeable, and the citizens were also very fond of him. He enthroned Dhruva as emperor of this planet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although it is misconceived that formerly the monarchical government was autocratic, from the description of this verse, it appears that not only was King Uttanapada a Rajarsi, meaning a saintly ruler, but before installing his beloved son Dhruva on the throne of the empire of the world, he consulted his ministerial officers and considered the opinion of the public, and also personally examined Dhruva's character. Then the king installed him on the throne to take charge of the affairs of the world. Yeah, you don't want a drunkard or a nonsense person as king. That would be a terrible mistake. When a Vaishnava king like Dhruva Maharaj was the head of the government of the entire world, the world is so happy that it is not possible to imagine or describe. Wow. Even now, if people would all become Krishna conscious, the democratic government of the present day would be exactly like the kingdom of heaven. Of course, when it says democratic government of the present day would be exactly like the kingdom of heaven, he's not referring to the present Democrats. If all people became Krishna conscious, they would vote for persons of the category of Dhruva Maharaj. If the post of chief executive were occupied by such a Vaishnava, all the problems of satanic government would be solved. The youthful generation of the present day is very enthusiastic in trying to overthrow the government in different parts of the world. But unless people are Krishna conscious like Dhruva Maharaj, there will be no appreciable changes in government because people who hanker to attain political position by hook or crook cannot think of the welfare of the people. They are only busy to keep their position of prestige and monetary gain. They have very little time to think of the welfare of the citizens. And that's a fact. That's definitely a fact. Text 67. Atmanam cha pravayasam akalaya vishampati vanam virakta pratistat vimrasan atmanogatim. After considering his advanced age and deliberating on the welfare of his spiritual self, King Uttanapada detached himself from worldly affairs and entered the forest. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is the sign of a Rajarsi. King Uttanapada was very opulent and was emperor of the world, and these attachments were certainly very great. Modern politicians are not as great as kings like Maharaja Uttanapada, but because they get some political power for some days, they become so much attached to their positions that they never retire unless they are removed from their posts by cruel death or killed by some opposing political party. It is within our experience that the politicians in India do not quit their positions until death. And they die with their boots on, as they say, meaning they They don't want to give up their position.
Yeah,
Huh?
that was happening even here. Like, like President Biden was
Biden,
was declining, but then
he didn't want to give up. Yeah. This was not the practice in olden days, as it is evident from the behavior of King Uttanapada. Immediately after installing his worthy son, Dhruva Maharaja, on the throne, he left his home and palace. There are hundreds and thousands of instances like this in which kings, in their mature age, would give up their kingdoms and go to the forest to practice austerity. Very nice. Practice of austerity is the main business of human life. As Maharaj Dhruva practiced austerity in his early age, his father, Maharaja Uttanapada, in his old age, also practiced austerity in the forest. In modern days, however, it is not possible to give up one's home and go to the forest to practice austerity. But if people of all ages would take shelter of the Krishna consciousness movement and practice the simple austerities of no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, and chant the Hare Krishna mantra regularly, 16 rounds. By this practical method, it would be a very easy task to get salvation from this material world. Wow, there it is. Wonderful statement. Thus, end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, ninth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhruva Maharaja Returns Home. So I want to read that again, the last part. It says, as Maharaj Dhruva practiced austerity is the main business of human life.
as Maharaj Dhruva practiced austerity in his early.
Okay. Practice of austerity is the main business of human life. As Maharaj Dhruva practiced austerity in his early age, his father, Maharaj Uttanapada, in his old age, also practiced austerity in the forest. In modern days, however, it is not possible to give up one's home and go to the forest to practice austerity. But if people of all ages would take shelter of the Krishna consciousness movement and practice the simple austerities of no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, and chant the Hare Krishna mantra regularly, 16 rounds. By this practical method, it would be very easy. It would be a very easy task to get salvation from this material world. Wow. There it is. That's the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who has made it very easy to actually go back to Godhead if we follow these simple principles of Sanatan Dharma. I like that. Let me read it one more time. In modern days, however, it is not possible to give up one's home and go to the forest to practice austerity. But if people of all ages would take shelter of the Krishna consciousness movement and practice the simple austerities, I like that, simple austerities of no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, and chant the Hare Krishna mantra regularly, 16 rounds. By this practical method, it would be a very easy task to get salvation from this material world. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, ninth chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhruva Maharaj Returns Home. Okay, well, there is our, what you would call, uh, benediction in this age, which is very difficult age, where at least 3/4 of the people in this age have no interest in Krishna consciousness or spiritual life. And the 25% that are still practicing somewhat on Krishna conscious activity or holy activity, that also is diminishing, unfortunately. Therefore, it has become very, let's say, simple to attain liberation from the material world, because it's so difficult to become, let's say, spiritually elevated in this age. Therefore, if but if people of all ages would take shelter of the Krishna consciousness movement and practice the simple austerities of no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, and chant the Hare Krishna mantra regularly, 16 rounds. By this practical method, it would be it would be a very easy task to get salvation from this material world. This is our major takeaway today. Okay, so now we're going to go to chapter 10. Dhruva Maharaj's fight with the Yakshas. Text number 1. Maitreya Uvacha. The great sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, thereafter, Dhruva Maharaj married the daughter of Prajapati Sisumara, whose name was Brahmi, and 2 sons named Kalpa and Vatsara were born of her." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears that Dhruva Maharaj married after being installed on the throne of his father, and after the departure of his father to the forest with self-realization. It is very important to note in this connection that since Maharaj Uttanapada was greatly affectionate towards his son, and since it is the duty of a father to get his sons and daughters married as quickly as possible, why did he not get his son married before he left home? The answer is that Maharaj Uttanapada was a Rajarsi, saintly king. Although he was busy in his political affairs and duties of government management, he was very anxious for self-realization. And therefore, as soon as his son Dhruva Maharaja was quite worthy to take charge of the government, he took this opportunity to leave home, just like his son, who, without fear, left home for self-realization, even at the age of 5 years. These are the rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. Okay, so this going away to the forest is something that is almost impossible for people to do today. So, what should people do today? Well, they should practice Krishna consciousness at home and regularly go to the temple, associate with devotees, and above all, chant minimum 16 rounds a day of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and follow all the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, which are basically very simple, just four things. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. Always chant Hare Krishna, associate with devotees, regularly hear lectures given by bona fide devotees, and engage in Harinam Sankirtan. So it's very simple. It's not complicated. What we should do in this age, what should be our culture. Our culture should be very uh, oriented toward being Krishna conscious and having the association of genuine devotees and engaging in these simple practices. You don't have to do Herculean uh, practices to be a devotee. You simply have to be able to control your mind and senses by keeping the mind and senses always engaged in Krishna conscious activities. And this is interesting. It says that Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son, Dhruva Maharaj, married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. So, in other words, he didn't have to get his son married before going to the forest for self-realization. That would happen. His son would eventually get married on his own. So it didn't stop his father to take a complete renunciation and go to the forest. But I like that. See, it's some people think, well, I can't go, give up this or give this other thing up, and they probably never. And now in modern life, they never give up living with the family and engaging in tapasya. But previously, the, the kings were anxious about giving up their responsibilities and going to the forest and performing tapasya and uh, purifying themselves so that they could be a good example to the rest of the people and at the same time prepare themselves to go back to Godhead. Nowadays, people don't want to engage in any austerities and they want to stay in their position right up to the moment of death. And that's not very good. It's not the real Vedic culture. And it's important here. It says, there are rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Very important statement. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. That's a very interesting statement. Yeah, usually nowadays the kings, they wait until they're very old and no longer capable of maintaining their position, then they might give it up. Or they wait until they die. But here, uh, uh, it looks like they're very enthusiastic to leave all their material responsibilities as soon as they have a son who's capable of managing everything. Uh, and that's why it says here, therefore, as soon as his son Dhruva Maharaj was quite worthy to take charge of the government, he took this opportunity to leave home, just like his son, who, without fear, left home for self realization, even at the age of 5 years. These are rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaja married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. Yeah, and most people just stay, and as long as they come, as long as they can, in position of a king, and usually die uh, before ever making any attempt for purification of themselves. Uh, so it's very sad. It's very sad. And here it says there are rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self realization. It's a very important statement. People say, well, I got to wait till my son gets married. And now I have to wait till my son has a son. And now I have to wait till that son gets to be uh, of the age where he can take over the country. And then I have to wait again for him to have a son. And then I have to wait till that son grows up. And then I have to wait till this, to that, I'm dead. But on the other hand, here the real culture says, therefore, as soon as his son Dhruva Maharaj was quite worthy to take charge of the government, he took this opportunity to leave home, just like his son, who, without fear, left home for self realization, even at the age of 5 years. These are the rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. Well, uh, people don't live today with such realizations. Okay, text number 2. Yes.
So Maharaj, in past you had mentioned that to dine with the your boots on.
Your boots on, yeah.
Just exactly, people are exactly opposite now.
Yeah.
And in the previous verse, Maharaj, there is one line in the purport. It says, there are hundreds and thousands of instances like this in which kings in their mature age would give up their kingdoms and go to the forest to practice austerity. So the mature age, they are not going in like old age.
Yeah.
How do they get this much detachment, Mara? Like in mature age, leaving to forest it requires a lot of like detachment as well.
That was the culture. The culture is how you do things. So in previous ages, this is how people did things. They would quit uh, uh, they would quit their positions of responsibility as soon as their son was qualified to take over the kingdom. and leave home for self-realization. So that was the whole thing. They realized that the real purpose of life is not to be a king until you die. It's to train your child, and when you see the child is qualified, then leave and take up a life of renunciation and spiritual realization. So you're ready to go back to Godhead. So here it says, these are rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. And how many people believe that now? No, not many people. Maharaj Uttanapada knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. This is completely different than what happens today. Okay. Text 2. The greatly powerful Dhruva Maharaj had another wife named Ila or Leela, who was the daughter of the demigod Vayu. By her, he begot a son named Utkala and a very beautiful daughter. Text 3. Dhruva Maharaj's younger brother, Uttama, who was still unmarried, once went on a hunting excursion and was killed by a powerful yaksha in the Himalaya mountains. Along with him, his mother, Suruchi, also followed the path of her son, and she died. Okay.
It was the Lord's promise that they both will be. When the Lord gave that as a way for getting his revenge taken at that time, of course, he was meditating with that in his heart because he was hurt with the way that Suruchi has done. So, I mean, it's all I'm saying is that it just happened, whatever the Lord has said in the previous chapter. In his appearance, that's the blessing. Well, not blessing in a way, but it's a
Culture.
boon that he was given.
Yeah. So, along with him, his mother Suruchi also followed the path of her husband. She died. Okay. Text 4. When Dhruva Maharaja heard of the killing of his brother, Uttama, by the Yakshas in the Himalaya mountains, being overwhelmed with lamentation and anger, he got on his chariot and went out for victory over the city of the Yakshas, Alakapuri. Purport. Dhruva Maharaja became angry, overwhelmed with grief, and envious of the enemies, was not incompatible with his position as a great devotee. All right, so it was normal that he should get angry, that his brother and his wife and his mother died like that. It is a misunderstanding that a devotee should not be angry, envious, or overwhelmed by lamentation. Dhruva Maharaj was the king, and when his brother was unceremoniously killed, it was his duty to take revenge against the Yakshas from the Himalayas, from the Himalayan mountains. Well, that's why it says, it is a misunderstanding that a devotee should not be angry, envious, or overwhelmed by lamentation. That's interesting. Dhruva Maharaj is becoming angry, overwhelmed with overwhelmed with grief, and envious of the enemies, was not incompatible with his position as a great devotee. It is a misunderstanding that a devotee should not be angry, envious, or overwhelmed by lamentation. Dhruva Maharaj was the king, and when his brother was unceremoniously killed, it was his duty to take revenge against the Yakshas from the Himalayas. Wow. Well, because these are all what you would say they are uh, very powerful warriors, and therefore, whenever these type of horrible things happen, they cannot tolerate it. Therefore, they have to get revenge. Dhruva Maharaj went to the northern direction of the Himalayan range. In a valley, he saw a city full of ghostly persons who were followers of Lord Shiva. Purport. In this verse, it is stated that the Yakshas are more or less devotees of Lord Shiva. By this indication, the Yakshas may be taken to be the Himalayan tribes, like the Tibetans. Whoa. Okay. Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, as soon as Dhruva Maharaj reached Alakapuri, he immediately blew his conch shell, and the sound reverberated throughout the entire sky and in every direction. The wives of the Yakshas became very much frightened. From their eyes, it was apparent that they were full of anxiety. O hero Vidura, the greatly powerful heroes of the Yakshas, unable to tolerate the resounding vibration of the conch shell of Dhruva Maharaj, came forth from their city with weapons and attacked Dhruva. Dhruva Maharaj, who was a great charioteer and certainly a great bowman also, immediately began to kill them by simultaneously discharging arrows 3 at a time. When the heroes of the Yakshas saw that all their heads were threatened by Dhruva Maharaj, they could very easily understand their awkward position, and they concluded that they would certainly be defeated. But as heroes, they lauded, meaning they glorified the action of Dhruva. Yeah, because these are all uh, warriors, and they actually thrive on battle. And when they see someone who's very, very expert at killing, they are impressed. That's why it says they lauded or they glorified the action of Dhruva, who was, a young boy actually, but he was very, very expert at fighting. This spirit of fighting in a sporting attitude is very significant in this verse. The Yakshas were severely attacked. Dhruva Maharaj was their enemy. But still, upon witnessing the wonderful heroic acts of Maharaj Dhruva, they were very pleased with him. This straightforward appreciation of an enemy's prowess is a characteristic of real Kshatriya spirit. Wow, very nice statement. Text 10. Just like serpents who cannot tolerate being trampled upon by anyone's feet, the Yakshas, being intolerant of the wonderful prowess of Dhruva Maharaj, threw twice as many arrows, 6 from each of their soldiers. And thus they very valiantly exhibited their prowess, meaning their power. Text 11 and 12. The Yaksha soldiers were 130,000 strong, all greatly angry and all desiring to defeat the wonderful activities of Dhruva Maharaj. With full strength, they showered upon Maharaj Dhruva, along with his chariot and charioteer various types of feathered arrows, parighas, iron bludgeons, nistrimsas, swords, prasasulas, tridents, parasvadhas, lances, shaktis, pikes, ristis, spears, and busundi, weapons. I'm glad I wasn't living at that time. It's so many weapons. Dhruva Maharaj was completely covered by an incessant shower of weapons, just as a mountain is covered by incessant rainfall. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura points out in this connection that although Dhruva Maharaj was covered by the incessant arrows of the enemy, this does not mean that he succumbed in the battle. The example of a mountain peaks being covered by incessant rain is just suitable. For when a mountain is covered by incessant rain, all dirty things are washed from the body of the mountain. Similarly, the incessant shower of arrows from the enemy gave Dhruva Maharaj new vigor to defeat them. In other words, whatever incompetency he might have had was washed away. Wow. He became more powerful by this challenge of all these arrows being thrown at him. As the Siddhas from the higher planetary systems were observing the fight from the sky, and when they saw that Dhruva Maharaj had been covered by the incessant arrows of the enemy, they roared tumultuously, "The grandson of Manu, Dhruva, is now lost." They cried that Dhruva Maharaj was just like the sun, and that now he had set within the ocean of the Yakshas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the word manava is very significant. Generally, this word is used to mean human being. Dhruva Maharaj is also described here as Manava. Not only is Dhruva Maharaj a descendant of Manu, but all human society descends from Manu. According to Vedic civilization, Manu is the lawgiver. Even today, Hindus in India follow the laws given by Manu. Everyone, therefore, in human society is a Manava, or descendant from Manu. But Dhruva Maharaj is a distinguished Manava because he is a great devotee. The denizens of the planet of Siddhaloka, where the residents can fly in the sky without airplanes, were anxious over Dhruva Maharaj's welfare in the battlefield. Srila Rupa Goswami says, therefore, that not only is a devotee well protected by the Supreme Lord, but all the demigods and even ordinary men are anxious for his security and safety. The comparison given here, that Dhruva Maharaj appeared to merge in the ocean of the Yakshas, is also significant. When the sun sets on the horizon, it appears that the sun drowns in the ocean, but factually the sun has no difficulty. Similarly, although Dhruva appeared to drown in the ocean of the Yakshas, he had no difficulty. As the sun rises again in due course at the end of night, so Dhruva Maharaj, although he might have been in difficulty, because after all it was a fight, and in any fighting activities there are reverses, that did not mean that he was defeated. Wow, he's a real Kshatriya. Text 15, and then we'll end. The Yakshas, being temporarily victorious, exclaimed that they had conquered Dhruva Maharaj. But in the meantime, Dhruva's chariot suddenly appeared, just as the sun suddenly appears from within foggy mist. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here, Dhruva Maharaj is compared to the sun and the great assembly of the yakshas to foggy mist. Fog is insignificant in comparison with the sun. Although the sun is sometimes seen to be covered by the fog, in fact, the sun cannot be covered by anything. Our eyes may be covered by a cloud, but the sun is never covered. By this comparison to the sun, the greatness of Dhruva Maharaj in all circumstances is affirmed. Haribol. All right, we'll read one more. Dhruva Maharaj's bow and arrows twanged and hissed, causing lamentation in the hearts of his enemies. He began to shoot incessant arrows, shattering all their different weapons, just as the blazing wind scatters the assembled clouds in the sky. Just as the blasting winds scatters the assembled clouds in the sky. Text 17. The sharp arrows released from the bow of Dhruva Maharaj pierced the shields and the bodies of the enemy, like the thunderbolts released by the King of Heaven, which dismantle the bodies of the mountains. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, the heads of those who were cut to pieces by the arrows of Dhruva Maharaj were decorated very beautifully with earrings and turbans. The legs of their bodies were as beautiful as the golden palm trees. Their arms were decorated with golden bracelets and armlets, and on their heads there were many valuable helmets bedecked with gold. All these ornaments lying on that battlefield were very attractive and could bewilder the mind of a hero. Purport. It appears that in those days soldiers used to go to the battlefield highly decorated with golden ornaments and with helmets and turbans. And when they were dead, the booty was taken by the enemy party. Their falling dead in battle with their many golden ornamental dresses was certainly a lucrative opportunity for the heroes on the battlefield. Wow. It's a whole different world. The remaining yakshas, who somehow or other were not killed, had their limbs cut to pieces by the arrows of the great warrior Dhruva Maharaj. Thus they began to flee, just as elephants flee when defeated by a lion. Text 21. Dhruva Maharaja, the best of human beings, observed that in that great battlefield, not one of the opposing soldiers was left standing with proper weapons. He then desired to see the city of Alakapuri, but he thought to himself, no one knows the plans of the mystic yakshas. Yeah, they're very tricky people. They can make different types of spells that trick people. In the meantime, while Dhruva Maharaja, doubtful of his mystic enemies, was talking with his charioteer, they heard a tremendous sound, as if the whole ocean were there. And they found that from the sky a great dust storm was coming over them from all directions. Now the Dakshas are using their mystic powers. Within a moment, the whole sky was overcast with dense clouds, and severe thundering was heard. There was glittering electric lightning and severe rainfall. Yeah, this is what the Dakshas do. Yakshas do. They completely bewilder people with their mystical powers. My dear faultless Vidura, in that rainfall, there was blood, mucus, pus, stool, urine, and marrow falling heavily before Dhruva Maharaj, and there were trunks of bodies falling from the sky. Oh my God, just imagine that. That's unbelievable. Next, a great mountain was visible in the sky, and from all directions, hailstones fell, along with lances, clubs, swords, iron bludgeons, and great pieces of stone. How can you exist in such a situation? Dhruva Maharaja also saw many big serpents with angry eyes, vomiting forth fire and coming to devour him, along with groups of mad elephants, lions, and tigers. Wow, that's enough to scare anyone, but not Dhruva. Then, as if it were the time of the dissolution of the whole world, the fierce sea with foaming waves and great roaring sounds came forward before him. Text 28. The demon yakshas are by nature very heinous, meaning horrible, and by their demoniac power of illusion, they can create many strange phenomena to frighten one who is less intelligent. Yeah, by the way, if you scare someone, it's actually sinful, and you'll have to suffer for it. When the great sages heard that Dhruva Maharaj was overpowered by the illusory mystic tricks of the demons, they immediately assembled to offer him auspicious encouragement. All the sages said, "Dear Dhruva, O son of King Uttanapada, may the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Sangadava, Sangadharma, who relieves the distresses of his devotees, kill all your threatening enemies. The holy name of the Lord is as powerful as the Lord himself. Therefore, simply by chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord, many men can be fully protected from fierce death without difficulty. Thus, a devotee is saved." Now, this is very good knowledge. And the last verse, the great Rishi approached Dhruva Maharaj at a time when his mind was very perplexed due to the magical feats exhibited by the yakshas. A devotee is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By his inspiration only, the sages came to encourage Dhruva Maharaj and assure him that there was no danger because he was a soul fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord. By the grace of the Lord, if a devotee at the time of death can simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, simply by chanting this Maha Mantra, he immediately surpasses the great ocean of the material sky and enters the spiritual sky. He never has to come back for repetition of birth and death. Simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one can surpass the ocean of death. So, Dhruva Maharaj was certainly able to surpass the illusory magical feats of the yakshas, which, for the time being, disturbed his mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhruva Maharaj's Fight with the Yakshas. So the yakshas were expert in creating havoc by mystical powers, and that was enough to scare most people. But Dhruva was not scared, and we'll see in the next verse what he did. Next verse is what he did. Okay, we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. And please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Are there any questions anyone has?
Any questions online? Maharaj, one question is, obviously when Dhruva Maharaj was meditating on the Lord, he got the boon, or kind of the Lord guarantees that the brother and stepmother will be killed. And it happened so, like as the devotee, he still is acting on that
Anger,
anger.
revenge.
Yeah, in the sense like, I mean, if it is the will of the Lord, so but it's still, I mean, one takeaway is that you still have to do your duty. Is that what the lesson is? In the sense like, even though it's the so you
Well, as a Kshatriya, yes, that is his duty.
yeah.
You can't just walk away from that.
Yeah.
If you're not a Kshatriya, just an ordinary person, you can try to tolerate it and just walk away.
Yeah. So that means like, even though we see that
Whenever a Kshatriya is challenged, he takes up the challenge. He doesn't walk away. That's a real Kshatriya. But ordinary people, it's wise to walk away and tolerate, the difficult things that are happening. Yeah, there's once a male bird, and he saw his baby bird and his wife killed. And he became really upset. But then he realized, I can't really do anything. So he just walked away. He just went away. Right? Because why should he also be killed, right, by some overpowering other enemies? Yeah. Now, some people would call that cowardice, but in another sense, it's intelligence. Why should he also die? So he walks away, and there will be another day when he might, still be alive to fight. Yeah. So sometimes that would be called the strategy of retreat to uh, to build up your strength for another future, uh, let's say, fighting. Why should everyone die in one battle? It's not smart. Yeah. See, unfortunately, there are situations where you're forced to fight. So, but as devotees, uh, at least we know that Krishna is going to protect us. So that means that we have the protection of the Lord. That doesn't mean that we're invincible. So there are certain conditions where you have no choice but to fight. But if we are regularly chanting Hare Krishna, we can expect that Krishna will, let's say, save us from such situations. But there are sometimes situations that you cannot ignore the responsibility of fighting. Like, for example, let's say some demon kidnaps your wife. You can't say, well, that wife is gone, I'll just get another wife. Right? That's not the right understanding. Although there are some people that think like that, but there's a responsibility to protect your wife and children. So it's complicated because in the material world, there's always going to be what you would call challenging situations, and we have to deal with those situations. We can't just ignore them. Anyway, we'll hear more about this as we go along. Yeah.
There are examples, like I think in one of the examples, Prabhupada writes that the sparrow who lays the eggs near the ocean's edge, and then the ocean swallows it, and then the sparrow now wants to dry the entire ocean with its beak, and then that Garda eventually hears that, and then Garda comes back.
He takes pity and
the sparrow. And then now he comes to support the sparrow, and then obviously Garuda is the bird of
gigantic
lord, right? The entire lord. So now the ocean.
So the ocean became frightened.
Yes.
And gave back the eggs to the sparrow.
So there's this
That's
balance between doing your duty and having the faith to fight, and then there's also the decision when to retreat. It's a very fine balance.
There was a saying that in the Italian army, there was one, let's say, what do you call it? One one movement to go forward and 10 movements to go backwards.
One step forward.
Yeah. So that means that they were always very easily defeated. You know, they didn't have the desire to be killed. Yeah, they're all different situations. I mean, it's the best thing to practice Krishna consciousness so that Krishna will protect us from these terrible situations. I mean, if you read the news, there's people being killed every day, and sometimes in very large numbers. But it's not happening to us. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, we're regularly following the principles of Krishna consciousness and not associating with non-devotees. Right? But if we associate with non-devotees, then we become caught up in their different challenges. Just like in World War I, when it was announced in England that they were going to war, the men came voluntarily. They were happy. They were joyful. They were going to go to a fight. When they got on the battlefield and saw what was happening, it was hell, right? So why should they? Why? What were they thinking before they went on the battlefield? They were all enthusiastic to go, and get killed. They didn't want to get killed, but they thought, oh, this will last only a few days. But no, it lasted for 5 years, and many people died. Many people died. It was hell. War is always hell. It's unimaginably cruel and nasty. And nowadays, they have more and more lethal weapons. You see, what is the real advancement of society today? They make more and more lethal weapons. That's their biggest achievement. How to kill more people faster. And they've come up with so many weapons now that are very, very expert in killing people faster. Amongst the cavemen, well, they had a club and they would kill one or two people. Now they have atomic bombs that can kill hundreds and thousands of people. In fact, the 2 atomic bombs that were used by America on the enemy At one time, from one bomb, they killed like 200,000 or 300,000 men. You just see how powerful the atomic bomb is, right? And also the corollary effects of the radiation killed people also. They were not only killed by the explosion, but by the contamination. It's horrible. And by the way, it can take sometimes 1,000 years for that contamination to go away. Nuclear contamination. It's terrible. Okay, thank you very much. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy.